Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
Minister, this is not the first time we have been in here in relation to this state's abject and absolute failure of the most vulnerable in society. And we are after a report, and my colleagues and others have stated absolutely eloquently of how it has not done the business that it was required to do, and at a huge cost of €13.6 million. And what is the finding? An absence of oversight and monitoring of grace. Look, we know the reasons why this commission was engaged in the first place, and that was on the basis of there were allegations of brutal assault, physical, sexual, financial abuse, obviously huge abuse in relation to, and there's been mention in relation to what sometimes is put down as regular negligence. But even then, when we deal with the failures around oral hygiene, or we deal with that would be sufficient for this to be an absolute disgrace. But when we talk about the wide I suppose, level of abuse, it's incredibly difficult to listen to these particular issues. And in fairness, it's not subject matter I'm particularly comfortable dealing with in any way, shape or form. But I think it's absolutely necessary that we have this opportunity and that we get down to, unfortunately, the brass tacks of the absolute failure. And I suppose in speaking about this, at times we do forget about, and we need to make sure that everyone remembers, right, Grace. Grace was a young girl with obviously intellectual and physical disabilities. She was non-verbal, which put her in an incredibly vulnerable position. I can't even imagine what this was like for her, and the difficulty for members of her families and whatever that get constantly re-traumatized by dealing with this. But we as a state have to deal with this. I am very glad from what I hear from Deputy Cullinan and from yourself in relation to that Grace is now living what is a fulfilling life, and that is obviously what she deserves. Now, we need to go through the ins and outs of, as I say, the abject failures. We're talking also about a report that has been produced. We know the multiple complaints in relation to the lack of an executive summary. We know that at this stage we have multiple lawyers who are representing Grace. We have those who have never commented before in the state legal infrastructure. And we have whistleblowers who are saying this wasn't worth doing in this, you know what I mean? And that's on the basis of the result we have at this point in time. Now, the onus is on government to actually lift what is a continuation of failure and to deliver. And as Deputy Cullinan has stated, we have abject failure when we talk about the fact that we do not have the safeguarding legislation that is required. And many of us were at this week at an event with Care Champions, where they again reiterated, where people and family members actually from the audience spoke about a huge level of the failures that they have encountered in relation to the lack of this safeguarding legislation. He also spoke about the absolute necessity in relation to mandatory reporting when we talk about those citizens within residential settings. Look, it's actually hard to comprehend how there are no findings from this report, and that there are no findings in relation to the failure by those that were employed by the state to look after, to care in any way, shape or form. And we look at Grace, who in around the age of 11 in 1989 was put in this house, because like my colleagues, it's very difficult to how you could call this a home. So she was placed there, and we hear that down to obviously numerous allegations, in 1991, a determination was made that no other children would be placed in this set of circumstances. No social worker visited Grace before 1995 in this placement. She was not removed from the foster care family when a complaint of sexual abuse was made to the South Eastern Health Board against Mr. X in 1996. 2007, a social worker warned again that Grace was vulnerable to abuse and exploitation, and she wasn't removed till 2009. There obviously, any right-thinking person, there is no defence in any way, shape or form. But Minister, it is where we go from here. It is ensuring that we do justice by Grace, but beyond that, that we also make sure that we fill those gaps that exist at this point in time in relation to the protections for those most vulnerable. We are talking about both children and we are talking about adults. And while things have improved, they have not improved sufficiently. And we can't just address this in the way we address many other issues in relation to learnings. And the onus is on government. And look, many people have spoken about some of the many other failures in this state. And the Taoiseach has spoken recently about he doesn't necessarily see commissions of inquiry or investigation on the means of, providing justice and the answers that are required by the likes of those people who survived the abuse of Michael Shine. But it's up to government to find a framework on how we actually deliver upon these. Since I dealt with the issue in relation to CHI, I had a man who came in and spoke about how he had been placed in a hospital setting. He spoke about how the doctors have spoken to him about that they find it incredibly strange in relation to the operations that he has had that has impacted in relation to his life. He also spoke about what I will just term treatment, but everyone can imagine that happened within this setting. I will be looking for governmental engagement on official level in relation to that case. And also another man who spoke to me about historic abuse within a school setting. And I am talking physical and sexual. He brought it to the Gardaí. It has not moved on. But it is a case of he's not sure that even, let's say, the inquiry that is to occur in relation to sexual abuse in schools, whether that will relate to him. So I'm asking yourself, Minister, and your government colleagues that we could ensure there would be communication with these two cases, which I'll bring to you, and we make sure that that's delivered upon, while we also owe a duty to Grace, and that there are no more future Graces, and that we do not fail our most vulnerable, as we have done for far, far too long.
Thank you, Deputy.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.